Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus edition of Harry Potter and the Boys, my fanfiction Harry Potter podcast. Today we are not talking about my fanfiction Harry Potter novel. We are in fact talking about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, specifically the on-stage version of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the 8th story in the Harry Potter in the Harry Potter franchise that takes place years after the Deathly Hallows, similar to my fanfiction actually, but this one goes in a very different direction to my fanfiction that I wrote when I was in year 7. Today I wanted to do essentially a comprehensive review on my thoughts on everything The Cursed Child. From how it works as an on-stage play and from a performance angle in terms of the actors and everything involved with this as a production. But, and I think what more people would maybe be interested in from hearing from me, the actual story of The Cursed Child and what I think about it and how I think it works. So all of that and more coming in this episode of Harry Potter and the Boys. So please keep tuned. I have tried to organize my thoughts and organize it into kind of sections. This may be a 2-part thing, depending how long I go. I really do not know how long I'm going to take talking about all my thoughts. So I do have my laptop in front of me, which I am going to be referring to, but I have a lot of thoughts, and I want to start by saying this will be a spoiler review. Like, I will be spoiling all the key narrative points of this book. Like, I will not be holding back. I will not be, shielding stuff from being spoiled. So if you do not want to be spoiled, maybe read the book or see the play before you listen to this. And I believe this may be the only podcast review of the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child play, especially in Australia. Sorry, specifically in Australia. I don't know of anyone else who has done it, and I don't know anyone else as nerdy as me who has done it or as into the Harry Potter canon as me has done it. I am filming this as well. I'm currently wearing my Hogwarts hoodie that I bought for $80 there, and I guess I'll just start by talking a little bit about the history of this and what I know about it, and essentially the final Harry Potter book, Deathly Hallows, came out in 2007, and I believed Cursed Child, and I could be wrong here, but I would say around about 2015, the play launched, and the book, the play as a book was also released then. So in 2015, I went to buy the book because I knew that I was not going to be able to see this play because it was overseas, and it wasn't at that point coming to Melbourne or Australia in general. So as a Harry Potter fan, I really wanted to read it and see what happened next in the Harry Potter story, in the Harry Potter canon. And, I think like a lot of people, I was pretty disappointed with this story. I was pretty taken aback with the brazenness of some of the narrative decisions in this story. And I really, really debated in my head as to whether or not I considered this story part of the Harry Potter canon. I know that J.K. Rowling, who wrote this alongside John Tiffany and Jack Thorne, I know she considers it canon and has urged fans of the Harry Potter franchise to consider this canonical to the Harry Potter universe, but a lot of fans, hardcore fans of Harry Potter, have made a conscious decision to not consider this story canon for a number of reasons, which I will get into later. And I believe the Melbourne version of this play would have launched probably in 2019, so a few years ago, and then obviously because of COVID, it went on hold for essentially the entirety of 2020, and the nights that I went to, which was the Thursday and Friday nights, just passed because there is obviously a part 1 and a part 2, each of which is 2 acts. So in total there are 4 acts. Every act is around about an hour long, and there's a brief interlude in between. Those were the first nights back for not only the Australian edition of the play, but worldwide. We were the first night back post-COVID in this post-COVID era, which was really cool. It was great to be in this environment and to finally be able to see this play, which is, very expensive, but for good reason, which I will get into later, but a really great night. So let's get into the review, and I will start, as I said, I have broken this into various categories of how I can talk about this and break it down. And I do want to start off by talking about the stagecraft and the performances. So this is actually, the play itself. I'm not really taking the narrative of the world into account here, because I feel like there are two different things here that we're talking about. We're talking about how this works as an on-stage experience for someone going to the theatre, and then how it works as a narrative continuation of the Harry Potter franchise, as a canonical or non-canonical entry into the world of Harry Potter. So first things first, I want to start by saying, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard this, and I feel like it has become almost a joke in talking about this play, that people say the story's shit, but you have to see it on stage. You have to see this play. Lots of people saying that. Story shit, it's an amazing play. And that is exactly how I would describe this. Like, this as a theatre experience is an experience I will never forget. Like, this was just an incredible achievement in what performance on stage can be. And I really like musical theatre. I've been to a lot of musicals. I've seen Wicked, thought that was incredible. I've seen The Lion King, Book of Mormon. Like, I remember the first time I ever went to a musical on stage. It was not long ago. It was like 2014. I would have been 20 years old when I saw it. I never really went to the theatre growing up. Parents weren't really into it. Never really went to it. The first show I saw was Wicked, and it blew my mind because I just had never experienced all of this incredible stuff in a stage setting before. I'd never had that experience in my life, and I just thought I was astounded by how amazing Wicked was in terms of, if you've seen it, flying across the stage and bringing a narrative to life on stage, and the incredible acting and everything like that. So I'm a huge fan of this kind of thing. Of course, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is not a musical. It is just a play, so keep that in mind. But in terms of, what they have achieved here, and, I know that the Harry Potter Wizarding World franchise is $1 billion franchise. Like, and if you have that much money, of course, the product you produce is going to be incredible. But I just was amazed at what I saw and how, and this is going to sound lame, but it really did feel like magic a lot of the time. This on stage was absolute magic. And I guess later in this podcast, when I'm going to be probably very critical of the story that is presented in this play, I do want to say that by chance, if anyone who is an actor or an actress in this play or is involved in the production of this play, none of the criticism of the narrative of this story is directed to any of those people, because every single person involved in this play does an incredible job. Everyone absolutely gave it 100%, gave it their all, and the acting was incredible. I loved how, and if you've seen the play, you will know that the scene transitions, when they're transitioning from scene to scene, there is often really fast motions from characters who are wearing cloaks to sort of show the passing of time, alongside this amazing on-stage score that I realized after seeing it was actually composed by Imogen Heap, the singer of songs like Hide and Seek, which is a really great song. That score was something amazing. And when I was watching part one on the Thursday night, at one point, I believe it happens when the characters first travel back in time, you actually hear samples of the lyrics from Hide and Seek when they emerge into the past. And I was like, what the hell? Why did we just hear the lyrics from Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap? And obviously I then go and look it up and find out that Imogen Heap is the person who wrote the music for this. The music is unbelievable, and it is so far removed from the score of the Harry Potter movies. And obviously intentional. This is not like a orchestral, string. I feel like a lot of the movie score is very orchestral and string based. The onstage is very modern sounding, very electronic, synthy, and so different, and none of the motifs or musical motifs from the movie scores appear in any way in this. There's none of the Hedwig's theme or the Diagon. It is totally original, not even repurposing the motifs as far as I can tell. I really liked it, and I saw that it's on Spotify, so I really want to check that out. So all of the music that plays when the scenes are transitioning is so amazing, and the speed at which these actors are just like changing the scenes, but the scene changes are a part of the play. Like, they're all in costume. It's not just someone walking in. And I'm sure like people who go to the theater all the time are probably used to this, but I don't go to the theater very often. So to me, this was a really cool thing to watch. It was very unexpected. Like, instead of just someone walking on and putting a chair on the stage and, moving something out of the stage, it's all artistic in how that is happening alongside the music and the performances and just breaking it up, like all of these points that could be considered slow points where the scene is changing, doesn't really feel like that. There's also some great moments where they're showing, it's almost like a montage on stage where they're showing like time is passing in terms of like Albus Severus, who is the main character and Harry's son. They're showing that he is progressing through his years at Hogwarts, and the way that they're showing time passing using lighting and effects and him like just the way that they show it without any of these characters leaving the stage and characters sort of coming in and out to see him and talk to him, and then showing that years are passing here in his life and he's sort of going through Hogwarts, and it doesn't feel like a slog, but it's essentially an on-stage montage. I want to give a huge shout out to one of my favorite moments in this entire play over the 2 nights, which is the end of Act 2 of Part 1, in which essentially, and I'm not going to try and, but basically Dementors appear in the story, and the appearance of the Dementors, this is the last moment of night 1 where things really take a turn for the worse for the narrative, and the Dementors appear on screen. One of the Dementors flies into the crowd, and it is a really harrowing and horrific, like very scary moment. Like, you really do feel the true terror of the Dementors based on the way the lights are, the ghostliness of the Dementors, who I think must be puppets. Like, I don't think there are actors under the Dementors, but I think they're puppets, flying around the audience, and just this darkness and it is really scary. Like, I would say that if I was a kid seeing this play, there were numerous points where I would have been very, very scared. And bringing to life the Dementors, who are such a huge, scary part of the Harry Potter universe, was really good. You see them doing the Dementors kiss a number of times, and just the way they kind of crowd around the characters just wow. Blown away by that moment. There is also a moment at the end of Act 3, as in Part 2, Act 1, in which you find out a key plot point of the story, and the entire theatre lights up suddenly, and basically invisible ink is used. So, there are points where, as an audience member, you're actually looking around because the entire theatre has invisible ink all over it and something's written on the walls, and it totally takes you by surprise, and all of the actors are looking out into the audience essentially, because they're seeing the same thing as you, which is that the entire theatre has stuff written all over the walls. An absolutely amazing thing. As I mentioned, the acting in this is incredible. A lot of the characters who are portraying legacy characters do a really good job of capturing how those characters were on screen. Like, I think their performances are really motivated by how actors that portrayed them in the film franchise did. Particularly Professor Mcgonagall, who is now the headmaster of Hogwarts. Professor Mcgonagall, whoever was portraying Professor Mcgonagall, and I apologize that I don't know the name of the person playing it, she just... It was like Maggie Smith was on stage. Like, the accent, the inflections, the characterization, and how her mannerisms. It was like watching the film Professor Mcgonagall. Absolutely nailed it. Incredibly immersive, because, like, I guess you want to feel like these are the same characters you've seen on screen or read in the books. Hagrid is in it a bit. Really great. They really nailed Hagrid being a really big, huge presence. I don't know how they made him look so big and tall, but yeah, Hagrid, really great. Nailed the accent. And Dumbledore as well, who appears as a portrait talking to Harry a lot. They really nailed the costuming, the look, everything about Dumbledore was incredible. Professor Snape appears, and now we are moving into the territory of stuff that sucks about the narrative, but I'll get into the narrative again. Another character who, was clearly very inspired by another actor, that was clearly very inspired by Alan Rickman's portrayal of Snape nails it. It is good to see Snape again, even though, for narrative purposes, I don't think Snape should have been in it, but it is good to see him. And probably the highlight for me was Moaning Myrtle, who was a severely underused character in the films. She does appear in Chamber of Secrets and the Goblet of Fire film, but she also was in particularly the Half-Blood Prince book. She was a very prominent character, and she had a relationship with Draco in that. You don't see that in the movie. It's really great in the book, but I loved seeing Moaning Myrtle. The actor portraying Moaning Myrtle did an incredible job capturing essentially all of the mannerisms of Myrtle in the films. And the way she's, all in grey clothing to make it look like she's a ghost, and the way she sort of moves on stage and moves on the scenery, or I think the scenery of the stage, really ghostly and just really capturing that character so well. Really funny scene as well with Moaning Myrtle, especially because both Harry and Draco as adults are back in this bathroom. They both know Myrtle. They've both had experiences with Myrtle, and she really leans into that. I absolutely love that. Ron, I found Ron, the actor for Ron was great. I did have a little bit of an issue with how Ron is portrayed in the play. He's definitely the comic relief character, which I guess he kind of was out of the main trio in the films, but he comes across in this as quite dopey. And I never really thought that Ron was necessarily dopey. He was definitely lazy, and he wasn't I think the thing with Ron is as a character, he doesn't because he's from a magical family, magic is just the thing for him, whereas someone like Hermione, who magic is new to, she just wants to know everything about magic, but Ron's just yeah, magic, school, whatever, this is so normal for me. Ron in this feels really dopey. Amazing performance by the actor portraying Ron, it was fine, but I just felt the way he was written was a little bit weird, and I thought he was just portrayed as a bit of an idiot, and I don't think Ron was an idiot. I think what he became was a very passionate and accomplished wizard. So that seemed a little bit off to me. The time travel, while narratively terrible, the moments where time is ticking back on stage, really amazing. The use of flashback sound effects, and then this amazing effect where it feels like the entire stage pulses, and there's this really low bass sound effect that plays, and it's just and you really feel like you've gone back in time. That is a really great effect as well. And there is also a scene where the characters are all underwater. I'm not sure if that was a pre-recorded thing over my brother, who I went with, thought that was actually pre-recorded because they're they would have had to be suspended from the roof, floating through the water. But I wasn't sure about that. I wouldn't think it would have been pre-recorded, but my brother claimed that it was. So I'm not really sure about that, but that was a really cool and interesting way of using the stage. So I guess that's my thoughts on this. This is a masterpiece in stagecraft and what can be achieved on a stage with great actors, a lot of money, and that's necessary to create something like this. But, amazing actors bringing these characters in this world to life, and amazing direction and stagecraft and everything like that. There's one scene where Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter have a duel in Harry's living room at home, and I did think that was possibly the cheesiest moment of the play. I didn't think that looked I just thought it looked really lame. If you've seen the play, I'd be interested to know your thoughts, but they're casting spells at each other, which is cool, and then the actors have to do these Matrix style movements where they're in the Matrix where they you get it. If you've seen the Matrix, you get it. And they're doing that kind of thing. It was kind of cheesy, but then there is another duel much later in the play, which is much, much better and looks much more incredible. The next section I want to do for this podcast review is a section that is essentially things/themes in this play that I think are really good. Themes that are present in this play, or in this narrative. We're now talking narrative because, as I've said, very controversial narrative, lots of fans really do not like what happened in this play in terms of the lore of the universe, the rules of the universe, and just the narrative and the characterization of a bunch of the characters. A lot of people don't like it, me included, but I do want to give credit to the writers of this story, including JK, of how the themes in this that I think are important and do really work and would have been really good if we took the time travel aspect out of it. So I want to talk a lot about that. I also did forget to mention there in the stagecraft, but the actors who portray Albus Severus and Scorpius Malfoy, who really are the main characters. They are, I guess, it's up in the air who the cursed child is. I guess it's Albus Severus, but, Scorpius Malfoy is also cursed in one way as well. So, they are really the cursed the cursed children, and they both do an incredible, incredible job, and they were just an absolute pleasure to watch on stage. So, themes about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child's narrative that work really well and I would like to see developed further. First of all, the entire concept of Draco Malfoy's son and Harry Potter's son becoming best friends at Hogwarts, great concept. A little bit fan-fiction-y, but still a really interesting concept because I think it sort of forces the hand of Malfoy and Harry to acknowledge that their sons are best friends and they kind of have to be friendly with each other. Which kind of leads me into another thing that I thought was really well, but I will get to that soon. The friendship between Albus and Scorpius, I really, really like. I think there is a lot of just great banter between them and this whole thing of I'm a Malfoy, you're a Potter, people don't expect us to be friends, all that stuff I think is great. And they bounce really well off each other. Scorpius couldn't be further from what you would expect a Malfoy to be. Right? Scorpius as a character is very scared. He's very, he's certainly not the cold-blooded kind of Malfoy that Draco and Lucius were. He's just he's a bit happy-go-lucky, but he's also very scared. He's also very, he's very uppity. He's very is that a good idea? Do you think that's a good idea? Should we do that? I don't know if that's a good idea. He's that kind of guy. Very much a comic relief character to Albus Severus, who is sort of the straight man of the duo, I suppose. But I really like the concept of Albus and Scorpius being friends. I think that opens a door of possibility that is really interesting, and I think they work really well together the way they're written. A lot of people believe that there is a homosexual relationship building between the two, that's not explicitly stated anywhere in the play, but a lot of people read and interpret this play as they are sort of falling in love with each other through their years being friends at Hogwarts, and I really like that. I think that when I read the play 5 or 6 years ago in 2015, when I read it, I didn't really get any of that. I didn't feel like there was any subtext to suggest that. So I kind of was I don't really see it like that. But seeing the play on stage, it really leans into that idea of them kind of being friends, but there's more than friendship here. It's almost like a love thing. It's they love each other and they don't want to be apart. And there are a few lines that kind of can be read either way, depending on how you want to interpret it. But whether this is a decision by the actors to kind of lean into that shipping angle of Albus and Scorpius, I'm not sure, or whether it is intentional. I think you can read it however you want to read it, but seeing the play comparatively to reading the book of the play, I definitely felt that there was a much stronger connection than just friendship. But that being said, you can platonically love a friend, absolutely. So, but the way I was reading it was particularly Scorpius to Albus, there was a little bit more than just we're best friends. It was I think it's there's a bit of love here. There's a bit of a deeper connection here. And I think even towards at the end of the play, Scorpius and Albus are laughing about how Scorpius asked out Rose Weasley, who is Hermione and Ron's daughter, another character in the play. And they were kind of almost like, I felt like the performance was almost knowingly them being like, hey, like, yeah, you asked her out, but like we both know the truth. Like, I don't know. I didn't really know necessarily how to read it, but I like that theme as well. Like, I think it's kind of fan fictiony, but the idea that Harry Potter's son and Draco Malfoy's son fall in love, I think that's great. I think that's a really good plot point. So on further from that is the relationship between Harry and Draco post Hogwarts is an incredible plot point of this book. And I thought that I think that this is something I would love to see more of. So basically, and my reading of it always was at the end of Deathly Hallows in the epilogue, Harry, both in the film and the books, but let's go with the books, Harry, Ron and Hermione see Draco sort of from afar with his son and wife, Scorpius and Astoria, on platform 9 3/4, and they kind of give each other like a knowing little nod, and, my reading of it is, hey, like 19 years later, there's no longer, they're not best friends anymore, they're not like mates anymore, they're not best friends now, or they're not mates now, but there's like this knowing like, hey, like the past is behind us and we can just be a civil people and we don't hate each other anymore. And also, my other reading of Draco in Deathly Hallows generally is that, at the end of that book / film, Draco kind of realizes that all of this stuff about pure blood, the pure blood kind of ethos and all of these thoughts and his family's, I guess racist in the magical world. It's essentially racist or bloodist, however you want to put it. It's certainly an allegory for racism. I think Malfoy realizes, hey, like this is fucked. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I don't want to be on Voldemort's side anymore. I don't want to do any of this. As does his mum, who voluntarily defies Voldemort to pretend that Harry is dead, knowing that he's not, to make sure that her son is safe. I think that Draco decides, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. Fuck this. I'm not going to be a Death Eater. I don't want to do this. And he sort of has a change of allegiance there, right? And that's not to say he's totally not the Malfoy that... I think Malfoy changes as a person after that war and starts to become much more tolerant of muggles and etc. And that's lent into a bit. Like he marries a woman, Astoria, who is very muggle friendly and is not by any means like a pure blood fantasist like the way his family was. And he even mentions that his father, Lucius, never liked the wife because she was too muggle friendly. So I think Malfoy just had a total change of heart. And I really like that. And I think the fact that in this story, Malfoy and Harry kind of have to work together to save their children is really good. This idea that they can be sort of civil, but there's still this rivalry between them, but they're kind of friendly now. I enjoy that a lot. I think, there's still a bit of Malfoy that's like, oh, fucking Harry, always trouble follows you. What, like, I just want to be done with this. And he doesn't necessarily want to be friends with Harry, but like, in the way of like saving their children, they have to kind of work together. And I really enjoyed them having to do that and having to talk through things. And there's a fantastic scene towards the end of the play because essentially one of the plot points is that Malfoy's wife and Scorpius's mum, Astoria, was very sick and eventually died. So she dies during the play. And seeing this very vulnerable adult Draco Malfoy who is very open about how he feels about his wife dying and how he's sad that his son is going to grow up without a mother. Like, all of these themes are really good. And I really like them. As well as the idea that, and then he's saying all this to Harry, and Harry's like, "Oh, Draco, like I'm so sorry. Like, what is there anything I can do? Do you need anything?" and stuff like that. And then this line from Draco of, "It can be very, very lonely to be Draco Malfoy," and he speaks a lot about how, a lot of people shun him because of his father's association with Voldemort. A lot of people in the wizarding world don't like Draco Malfoy or judge him, and he's like, I can't escape my past, but I've changed. Like, I can't escape that. That's just what it is. But Scorpius shouldn't have to deal with being a Malfoy and things like that. And this idea that Draco likes what life is now. Like, Draco likes that this new him that he's become and this world that he's created with his wife. Like, and, I just like that. I like Malfoy's development as a character in this play. I think there is a lot to glean there. Albus being sorted into Slytherin house, therefore meeting Scorpius, is a great plot point, because I think it breaks down this idea that Slytherin is like the evil house or the bad house. Because I think that like a lot of dark wizards happen to be in Slytherin because, yeah, they have these pure blood tendencies and stuff, and that's this inherent racism in the wizarding world. But I actually think there's probably a lot of Slytherin students who are just like normal students at Hogwarts. And I don't think that being in Slytherin just inherently means you're evil. Like, I don't. And that's not a characteristic of the Slytherin house to be evil. And we see other Slytherins who are noble, and we see Gryffindors who are evil. Like, Peter Pettigrew is a Gryffindor who betrayed his friends and essentially revealed their location to have them murdered by Voldemort. And, Peter Pettigrew is like a spineless coward who was in Gryffindor. Horace Slughorn is like a pretty normal guy who fights against Voldemort, and he was a Slytherin. Like, I think that people think that if you're in Slytherin, you're evil, and everyone knows that, where I think it's more just like some people from Slytherin are evil. And yeah, a lot of pure blood students go into Slytherin and have those tendencies from their parents. So I liked the idea of Albus being sorted into Slytherin while his siblings are sorted into Gryffindor. That's really good. And another great theme that works very, very well in this play is this idea of Harry Potter having to deal with the trauma of his childhood and adolescence and teenage years, that really he never really got the chance to deal with, because he was always fighting a war, essentially. Like, him clearly being traumatized by not only what happened to him as a child with the Dursleys, but also the death and destruction around him, and the expectation around him, and him sort of being a celebrity in the wizarding world, and this idea that becomes a plot line in the story of coming to terms with all of the people that died for him, essentially, in the world. Well, I would say they died for a greater cause, but a lot of people see it as, they died to protect you, or they died for you. Having to come to terms with how some people don't perceive Harry as a hero. Some people, such as Cedric Diggory's father, who is a prominent character in this play, see him as the person who is responsible for his son dying. And like, my son died because of you. My son died because he was a spare in the maze. Like, he died because of you, and you're the famous Harry Potter who got to live and gets glory and all of this, and my son had to die. His life was taken from me, and I'm an old man, and I just want to see my son again. There are a few flashback moments where we see instances of Harry with the Dursleys that we never saw in the books. There is one particularly great moment in which Aunt Petunia takes Harry to the Godric's Hollow graveyard to visit his parents' grave. And Harry, as a child, says to her, pre-knowing about magic, Harry says to her, hey, you said my parents didn't have any friends and no one liked them, right? And Petunia's like, yeah, no one liked your parents. And it's like, how come there are so many flowers all over their graves? And Petunia actually starts crying and, tells him, well, no, like, someone's played a trick and put all the flowers on that grave as a joke. Like, no one knew parents, but she's in tears. And I always really like seeing Aunt Petunia's, like, knowing that somewhere deep inside Aunt Petunia there is this, trauma of, hey, my sister was murdered, and just, knowing that she is sad about that, but just doesn't want to express it because of her jealousy and everything. But she is really sad about it, and she does really regret everything that happened. I think that's a really, really great theme. There is a deleted scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 in which Harry is saying goodbye to Aunt Petunia and says, you need to leave and then Aunt Petunia says, yeah, I know what these people are capable of. Like, you didn't just lose your mum that night, I lost my sister. And there's like, this thing of like Aunt Petunia being like, fuck, like she does miss her sister, and she does miss like all of that, and she does care about Harry, but she just doesn't want to express it. And I thought that was a really good scene to include in this. The final thing that I think works really well thematically and narratively, and it's kind of a twofer, because obviously Harry and Malfoy start to become a little bit chummy, as Ron puts it. Ron is still like, hey, Malfoy, I still don't really like you or trust you, and you've said some shit things to my wife Hermione about, calling her a mudblood, and then Hermione's like, hey, Ron, like, we're all on the same team here, let's just be friends. And I liked seeing how Ron is still sort of, like, everyone felt very in character. Like, Ron wouldn't just, like, want to be friends with Malfoy. And I liked him standing his ground in that way. But here's a point that I think is great, which is due to a bunch of the time travel based plot, which again I think is a general negative, but there is one point at the very end of the play, spoilers, in which essentially all of the main cast is back in Godric's Hollow the night Harry's parents are being murdered by Voldemort, and Harry realizes that in order to make things right, he needs to essentially watch his parents be murdered by Voldemort and allow that to happen, allow them to be murdered and not intervene. And he has this great line, and this is one of my favorite parts. Despite all the time travel stuff, I still think this is a great theme and a great moment in which Harry says, he says something like, I'm about to watch my parents die and I can't do anything about it. And then I think, well, it's definitely Draco who says most of this, but Draco essentially says, and I loved this moment. This is a great moment. Draco says to him, no, you can do something about it. As in, he can go in there and stop Voldemort, right? He says, no, you can do something about it, but you're not going to. And that's heroic. And it's essentially Malfoy, like, acknowledging that Harry is a hero in this moment. And Malfoy saying, yeah, it's essentially Malfoy comforting Harry Potter, saying, hey, like, you could go in there and save your parents, but you know that it's a bad idea because it's going to change time. And because you're doing nothing, because you're willing to sit here and watch your parents be murdered, you are a hero. And I really liked that moment of Malfoy comforting Harry. I thought that was a very great moment in this story. Finally, one more thing, is Dumbledore's usage as a painting in the portrait, and Harry almost being angry at Dumbledore at one point in the play, being like, why did you have to do all this? Why couldn't you protect me? Like, what, blah, 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 like all this stuff. Dumbledore being really emotional about it as a portrait. And then there is a great line from Dumbledore, which I do want to read. I went through and highlighted it last night. It is one of the last scenes in the thing, and this was just, for everything people say about J.K. Rowling, I think that she is quite a strong writer. Like, she's particularly this line, if I can find it, here it is. So Dumbledore says to Harry, Harry, there is never a perfect answer in this messy and emotional world. Perfection is beyond the reach of humankind and beyond the reach of magic. In every shining moment of happiness is that drop of poison, the knowledge that pain will come again. Be honest to those you love. Show your pain, because to suffer is as human as to breathe. And I just thought this was a profound and poignant message of this play, which deals with, trauma and dealing with traumas of the past and dealing with imperfections, and, Dumbledore as the character that he is really kind of putting it into perspective for Harry. I did highlight one more, and this goes back to Harry dealing with his trauma. So I should have read that then, but I would like to read it as well, because I think this is a great exploration of Harry's character, his trauma, and his guilt about the past, where he says, I shouldn't have survived. It was my destiny to die. Even Dumbledore thought so, and yet I lived. I beat Voldemort. All these people, my parents, Fred, the Fallen 50, and it's me that gets to live? How is that? All this damage, and it's my fault. The boy who lived. How many people have to die for the boy who lived? And I think that's another great moment of Harry in this play. So those are the themes that I really like in this play. Those are the things that I think work really well. And there is a lot to like about this play. And I think seeing it on stage really reiterated that to me, because I think I've really soured on it over the years after reading the books once. I'm like, no, I never want to read that again. It's so shit. I never want to read it. But like seeing the play, I was like, no, there's a lot about this that actually does work. So here are the points that I think do not work, should not have happened, and their inclusion actually makes me frustrated about the fact that they were allowed to happen. And please don't think like that I'm angry about I guess I am kind of angry about these things, but the play is amazing and I think you should see it if you like Harry Potter. But there are some things that happen in this that just do not work at all. And well, there's two big things here. So I guess the first one I will talk about because it's the main plot point of this play, which is the usage of time travel. Essentially, if you've read the book, you know, but the plot of this is that Amos Diggory, Cedric Diggory's dad, wants to go back before he dies to save Cedric from being killed and bring him back and spend moments with his son. Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy overhear this and decide to do it for him using an illegal time turner that the Ministry of Magic has found. Because after the events of Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the other Harry Potter thing that uses time travel, more on that later, all the time turners were destroyed, but one has been found and seized by the Ministry. They steal it and they decide we're going to go back in time and save Cedric Diggory. Now, there are a number of reasons why this does not work. And there are a number of terrible things that happen as a result of this that just suck. So here is me venting as a huge nerd about why the time travel in this play is stupid, terrible, and just should not have happened. So we see time travel in Prisoner of Azkaban, as I said, which Hermione is required to use a time turner to Hermione and Harry are required to use a time turner from Dumbledore to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak, essentially. And what we learn about the rules of time travel, because time travel is very interesting conceptually, right? It can have various different forms of functionality depending on the universe it's in. So using Prisoner of Azkaban as an example, what we realize about the established rules of time travel in the world of Harry Potter is that Harry and Hermione go back in time, and it's done really well in the film, right? Essentially, in Harry Potter, time travel is possible, but all of time exists on a single plane that is unable to be altered. Essentially, if you go back in time, you were there the entire time in the past. You always existed in the past. You were always going back, and you're not going back and diverging into a new timeline. You are actually going back and you were always on that timeline. Your future self always came back, did what they did, and then went back to the future, right? That is the way time travel works in that Harry Potter film. And that is a crucial part of the plot of that film/book, which is, particularly where Harry is being attacked by the Dementors and a mysterious Patronus in the shape of a stag comes to save him. And Harry's only logical conclusion at that point is that he must have seen his dad. He believes, I saw my dad across the lake. He came to save us. He cast his Patronus. That was my dad. Because he sees someone that vaguely looks like him casting a stag Patronus. He assumes that it was his dad. He then realizes, no, okay, it was always me. I was the one doing it from the future. And when I saw my dad, I was actually seeing me. And I knew that I could cast the Patronus to save myself because I had already seen myself do it, right? There was never a go back in time and create a new timeline in which this happened. It was always there. Harry mistook his dad for himself. He was always there in the timeline. Single timeline, unable to be altered. Now, let's talk about how time travel works in Cursed Child. If you've seen Back to the Future, which I'm sure most people have, the way that time travel works in Back to the Future, probably one of the most famous examples of time travel fiction in the modern zeitgeist, Back to the Future actually has a different type of time travel, which, as you know, basically it's like the butterfly effect. If you go back in time, and change something, then that one change has a ripple effect that can cause the entire future to change. Because you change one thing, every other thing in place changes, and a new timeline emerges where things change, right? that's how it works in Back to the Future, which is, that's why you see all these things. And like Futurama does a good parody episode. And, there's the thing of like Fry sleeps with his own grandmother and becomes his own grandfather, and just things like that. And in Cursed Child, the time travel functions the same way as it functions in Back to the Future, right? Like they go back in time. It's totally different from Prisoner of Azkaban. They change things and then they come back to the future and it's a new timeline where things are completely different. In theory, great, but that is not how time travel originally worked in Harry Potter, and it is impossible for those two types of time travel to coexist in the same fictional universe. It is actually impossible. It's not like me being angry about it, saying that it couldn't happen. It's just like, it is not possible for time travel to function both ways in the same universe, especially like using the same thing, which is a time turner. Like the time turner can't change. You can't change how the time turner works to suit a narrative. Like that is how time travel works in that existence. And it is impossible for this new type of time travel to exist. Like, again, not a theory. It is a fact that type of time travel could not exist in the same universe as the other style single plane time travel, right? It is not possible. And I think this is where a lot of people get very angry at this. It shouldn't work like that, and it can't work like that, right? And not only that, but I feel like this decision was made purely to allow legacy characters to appear in the alternate timelines that were dead. Like, that's how Snape appears, because he's alive in this alternate timeline where Voldemort won the war. And also just like, these alternate timelines are so bad. I think looking at it from like a feminist reading, for example, in one of the timelines, Hermione and Ron never got married because of a series of things. And in that timeline, in the real timeline, Hermione is Minister for Magic. But in the timeline where her and Ron don't get married, Hermione is a bitter and angry, essentially Snape-like Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, who is very angry and bitter and like never reached any success, which I just like, really dumb choice to imply that without Ron, Hermione wouldn't have been successful. Like, I really like Hermione and Ron being married, but like, I don't think that if Hermione wasn't with Ron, suddenly she'd just be this bitter, angry Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, because that's not in character for her at all. Like, and that she needed Ron to become the success she was, and without Ron, she's just like this lame, angry Defense Against it. I don't know, it just felt so bad. That seemed like a really, really strange decision for me. In one timeline where Voldemort wins the war, Cedric Diggory becomes a Death Eater because instead of saving him in the Triwizard Cup tournament, they go back in time and humiliate him. And because of the humiliation, Cedric Diggory becomes a Death Eater, right? Which seems so out of character. Like, I just cannot envision Cedric Diggory ever becoming a Death Eater because of some weird humiliation at the Triwizard tournament. Like, it just seems so weird that he would go and become a Death Eater in this alternate universe. It is then revealed that Cedric kills Neville Longbottom at the Battle of Hogwarts. Also seems out of character that this one humiliation at Hogwarts led him to become a murderer. And then because Neville was killed, no one ever killed Nagini the Snake at the Battle of Hogwarts. And Voldemort ended up winning because Harry couldn't kill him because one of the Horcruxes was still alive. Now, all of that is fucking stupid, but just to further that discussion, I also don't think that that's what would have happened, because Harry was still, in that instance, the master of the Elder Wand. So if Voldemort attacked him and used Avada Kedavra on him, it still wouldn't have worked. So I guess, yeah, maybe Voldemort wouldn't have killed... I think Voldemort wouldn't have been able to kill Harry still, but yeah, Voldemort wouldn't have died. So they both would still be alive. Like, in this iteration, Voldemort kills Harry, but that wouldn't have happened because he was using the Elder Wand, which Harry was the master of at the time. So to me, that just felt super, super stupid. I am really, really anti this entire concept of how the time turner worked in this. I hate it. I think it is a very really brazen decision for J.K. Rowling, because she must have known that this was totally anti how it worked. She must have known, but just did it anyway. She must have known people would get upset with it. And as someone who is so protective of the Harry Potter brand and the Harry Potter narrative, like, it just seems like a real betrayal of your own audience to do that. Like, that's how I feel about it, for sure. And maybe I'm just like, maybe I am reading too much into it, but I'm sure, I know, like, I've seen the discussion on, you know, Reddit and everywhere, that this is like generally how people feel about the Cursed Child, that it is just the time travel aspect just ruins the laws of the universe that it exists in. Maybe only nerds think about this like me, but I cannot accept that. So there's one thing. All of the time travel stuff, really stupid. And that's the huge flaw. The huge thing that upsets me is this could have been so good. Like, all of these themes that I spent like half an hour talking about are really good. So here's the other thing that doesn't work for me. Another huge plot point that is revealed is that Voldemort had a daughter, Delphi, who is posing as Cedric Diggory's cousin, Delphi Diggory, when she is actually Voldemort's daughter. She wants to use the time turner to bring Voldemort back. She wants to complete the bidding of the Dark Lord and etc. Cool. I guess. Cool. But, and Delphi is a fun character. She's a great character, portrayed really well. However, few things that are wrong with this. The first thing that is wrong with it is that, and I think a lot of people I've spoken to have agreed with this, is that I do not think that Voldemort would have ever had a daughter or a child in general. And I'll unpack my thoughts on this a little bit. I think that Voldemort, as a character, his whole mission was to become immortal. That's why he literally split his soul by becoming a mass murderer and created the Horcruxes, right? If having a child and because, let's talk real world, a lot of us, we know we're not immortal. We all know we're going to die. So a lot of people are like, well, I'll pass on my genetics to a child, create a child, and that's me, that's me doing the only thing I can do to continue my family line, right? Voldemort, no, he literally wanted to become immortal and was willing to do whatever it took to become immortal. And the idea that Voldemort would have settled for, okay, I'll just have a child and pass my DNA along is just ridiculous. It was so out of character for him. It would be so out of character for him to do that, to have a child and be like, okay, this is the next big thing. Because not only was Voldemort so fixated on being immortal, but he was also an incredibly selfish, self-motivated, and self-important character. Voldemort really does not care for anybody else. He cares about himself and being immortal. And I just do not think he would ever have a daughter. The other thing, and my other reading of it is and this, again, this is probably where I think maybe you're thinking too much about it, but I know other people think about this stuff. So I guess the other thing I think about with it is that I don't think that, Voldemort, the more Horcruxes he made, the less human he became. Right? Essentially, he was more monster than human by the end. And, obviously the play Bellatrix Lestrange is the mother, implying that at some point Voldemort and Bellatrix had sex. And I just don't think Voldemort would have ever, wanted to have sex at that point. I know this is just thinking so much about it, but, Voldemort to me always came across as a very, non-human. And yeah, at one point he was a boy and a student and a teenager, and I'm sure, had interest in sex and sexuality, but I just do not think that at the point he would have been even necessarily able to have sex, and B, interested in doing it, being the self-important person he was. I just don't think that he would have done that. And also, I don't think that I reckon if Voldemort was shooting, I reckon he was shooting blanks by that point. He's so not human. How could he even, surely your DNA is impacted by that. Surely Voldemort cannot impregnate a woman. I really just do not believe that he could impregnate Bellatrix Lestrange. I just don't think that, even if he has a penis, even if he has semen or whatever, this is definitely thinking so much about it, but I do think about this. I just don't think he could. I do not think that it is in his character, one, to want to have sex or to have any sexual desire at all, because I just don't think that matters to him at all. I don't think he's human enough to experience like sexual need or sexual arousal. Two, I don't, even if he did have sex, I do not think that he is human enough to pass on any DNA that he has left. I don't think he's human enough to impregnate a woman. And C, it is totally out of character for him to have a child. Did I just do an unpacking of the sexuality of one of the biggest villains in modern fiction? Yes, I did. Voldemort would never have a daughter. Voldemort would never have a child or be interested in having a child, be interested in passing on his legacy or his DNA to somebody else, because that is not his character. Voldemort is a self-aggrandizing person. Voldemort isn't like, say, I often use like a Star Wars analogy for Harry Potter, because I think Star Wars is like something like Harry Potter, where it's just a huge global phenomenon and a great story, right? Darth Vader is a human. He is not like Darth Vader. Yeah, he's got like this robotic helmet on, but he was always a human. It was always a human underneath that. It is very explicit in Harry Potter that the more Horcruxes Voldemort made, the less human he became, to the point where his face started deforming. Like, he literally looks the way he does because he was so not human anymore. He was something else. He was some other. And yeah, I just thought that was really weird. In terms of like, when I look at, say, the time travel aspect, and to use this Star Wars analogy again, because like a lot of people are like, a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans, when the Star Wars prequels came out, were like, this is shit, I fucking hate it. And like me, who didn't grow up watching the original Star Wars and saw the prequels sort of first, because they were the ones that were out when I was a kid. Like, I was always like, oh, I don't mind the Star Wars prequels. But as a Harry Potter fan, I now can kind of understand that, because one of the main plot points in the prequel Star Warses was this idea where they changed that the Force was like this mystical thing, and they made it so the Force was actually a thing made up of midichlorians, which were like small micro life forms that made up the Force, and people hated that because it changed the established rules of what the Force was. And I feel like the time travel in this is the same as the midichlorians. It ruins the established set up rules of this universe, and it just, to me, totally ruins it. And so I did a lot of thinking about this, and as I've said, there is so many good themes in this. I outlined it. Rewind the podcast. I outlined all the really great decisions by the writers of this that are kind of spoiled by these things that don't work. But I had to do a lot of thinking about this, and the conclusion that I have come to is, I know J.K. Rowling says that the Cursed Child is canon, but to me, I believe that based on the fact that time travel functions differently between Prisoner of Azkaban and Cursed Child, I actually do not think, as someone who really likes this stuff, world building, universes, fantasy, sci-fi, lore, like all this stuff I really like and I think about a lot. I'm a huge nerd, guys. I'm a huge nerd. All of this stuff is important to me. And based on my entire knowledge of how all this stuff works, to me, it is actually not possible. It is not possible for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child to be canonical in the Harry Potter franchise. It is actually not a feasible or possible thing, because you cannot change the rules of how time travel work. It's not like it's. I don't think it's up for debate. Like, I just think it is not actually possible for that to be canon. It is a fun story and it's an incredible play, but as far as my understanding of fiction and literary fiction work, there is no in-universe explanation there to explain why time travel functions differently now. It's just a plot convenience for J.K. Rowling to bring back characters like Snape and explore how characters like Hermione would be if they never married Ron, which was ridiculous anyway. Like, there is no in-universe explanation that explains how time travel changed. And I don't like that. So to me, I cannot consider Harry Potter and the Cursed Child canon in the Harry Potter world. I just can't. Like, to me, it is not possible for them to be canon. We're nearly at the end here. I've been going for an hour, which is says a lot about my nerdiness, that I can talk about this for an hour. So here are my final thoughts. One, I don't consider it canon, and I will not consider it canon. Two, I think that this is an incredible play that even if you have read the book and enjoyed it, and not enjoyed it, like me, I think you will get a lot out of seeing this on stage. I think seeing it on stage really adds a lot to it and makes it really, really enjoyable. And I think you would definitely like it a lot. The play, here's the thing. This is a marvel in stagecraft. This is an achievement in what can be done on a stage. There are parts where they're going into the Ministry of Magic through the phone booth and they get sucked into the phone booth, the actors. No idea how that happened. I have no idea how that possibly could have been done on stage. It literally looks like they're sucked into the phone booth. I have no idea how it happened. This is a masterpiece in stagecraft. This is an incredibly performed and passionate performance from every actor. Like, you know that every actor up there on stage understands how important Harry Potter is to a lot of people, and they do an incredible job with it, and I loved that. Narratively, there are some incredible, incredible parts of this. Honestly, there are incredible parts of this, and there are a lot of themes that are really good. But at the end of the day, the time travel and Voldemort having a daughter just really, really irritates me. As a fan of this universe, it really irritates me. But I would love to see this again. I would see it again. I'm sure this will be adapted into a film at some point. I don't know when, but I am positive this will eventually be adapted into a film. And I don't know if it will work as well in a film. And I would love to see another go at this story. Like, I would love to see this story without the time travel and have some other thing happening in the present that is the key plot thing that's causing all these relationship things to happen. Overall, I had a great 2 nights, and I loved it. Like, I had a great time watching this play, seeing these characters again on stage, and I can't wait for how the Harry Potter universe develops moving forward. But yeah, I mean, I'm still not a huge fan of the narrative, and I know a lot of listeners have messaged me about it and not liked it either. So that is my comprehensive guide and review to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, parts 1 and 2, which I saw here in my hometown of Melbourne at the Princess Theatre. It was amazing. I think I'm going to try and get in touch with some of the cast members and see if they want to do an interview on my Mike Talks series. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you made it to the end, please listen to, obviously, the Fanfiction podcast. I mean, I assume you already do, but if you haven't, check them out. And my other podcast, 20th Century Boy, I would love for you to check out as well. That comes out every Thursday. And the vodcast of this will go up on YouTube. So subscribe to my YouTube, Radio Mike. I am nearly at 1,000 subscribers, and I would love to have you on board there. Nearly daily content there. Thank you so much for listening and sticking with me. Please let me know your thoughts. I would love for you to write to me about your thoughts. If you've read the play, if you've seen the play, where did you see it? What did you think? What do you think of my thoughts? What do you think of my thoughts on the play? Like, yeah, I'd love to have a dialogue with listeners of this show about this, because I know a lot of listeners of Harry Potter and the Boys are, huge old school Harry Potter fans. So it would be awesome to have a chat about it. All right, guys, my name has been Radio Mike, and this podcast has been The Inside of My Mind. Catch you later.
But I went to run my hand through your hair and I noticed you were attached to string. You were a puppet this whole time, you were attached to string.